Hi friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Tammy Ernest and I am a long arm quilter, and here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own projects. If you're new here, I thought I would just start out with an introduction. I've been doing this about 6 months or so some of you, I'm sure you've gotten some information through different videos, who I am, what I'm doing, how long I've been doing this, but I just thought I would put it all in one big chunk so you kind of get to know me a little bit. I live in rural Indiana. We're about an hour west of Indianapolis, and I've lived in Indiana my entire life. I've been married to my husband for 32 years, and we have 7 children. And we're a homeschool family, so I've homeschooled all of them. Actually, the oldest one, he went through grade school, and then we pulled him out, and I finished up through middle school and high school with him, but the others have been all the way through. We're graduating our 6th one this May. Beginning of June, he'll actually graduation. And our 7th one is our special child. He has Down syndrome, so he will be in school for a couple more years here. He is 17, but I'm going to keep him in school a few more years. And so my life has been very busy over those 20, 30 some years. But now that they're all growing and off on their own, 4 of them are still in the house. 3 have either married or moved out, and then another son will be the one that's graduating, will be going to college this fall. A couple others work full-time, so I have a lot more time on my hands than I used to. So let's see, in 2003, when I was pregnant with number 5. My mom introduced me to a lot of quilting things, and so that's when I began my quilting journey. Those early years I didn't do a whole lot because I had so many little ones, but it was nap time. I remember I had a sewing room set up across the hall from their bedrooms, and so I would, just a small table, and I would start sewing that way. But anyway, I've been quilting now for 20 years. My mom first bought a long arm, and I would ask her to finish my quilts on her long arm. And then I asked her to teach me, and then it progressed. I bought my own. So in 2010, I bought my first long arm. It was hand guided. It's a Handy Quilter HQ16, so hand guided on a 10-foot table. Began quilting my own quilts, and then just a year later I began quilting for other people as well. And then in 2020 I sold that machine and bought a digitized long arm. I'm now on a 12-foot table, so I can handle the largest quilts, and all computerized, and I'm so enjoying it. And so that's my quilting journey. That's a little bit about me. We live in rural Indiana. We're on 27 acres. It's just a hobby farm. We don't do any of the farming ourselves. We have done pumpkins and pigs and those kind of things in the past, but nothing as a business. My husband's actually an insurance agent and has been doing that 30 plus years. He's been in the insurance industry since before I was around. So but enjoy the country life, we sure do. And so hope you had a great Mother's Day. We did. Most of the kids got together with us, and we went to a state park and did some hiking and had some lunch together. Very enjoyable. One of my daughters gave me this cute necklace for Mother's Day, and I just had to show you because look at the little sewing machine pendant on there. So cute. She got this in Danville, Indiana, a little shop called Seize the Night on the square there in Danville. And if they have a website, I'll link it for you so you can see that. But really cute, little jingly. I like my jingly stuff. So today I have no updates on my personal projects. Well, I do. I have my, tonight is Quilt Guild, so I do have my challenge for today, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But my quilt-alongs, my So Scrappy Spools, and my Calico Garden, I did not get anything done on those this week. I have tons of long arm stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 long arm quilts this week, so that's going to fill up our time here today. But I did have some questions that have been coming in, so I just thought I would answer a few of those. I've answered them either on email or in comments, but I thought I would take a few of those and just answer those here. I get a lot of questions about what batting I carry here, because if you send a quilt to me, I know it's expensive to send along your batting as well. So I do have batting for sale, and I stacked them up over there. I have an account with Quilter's Dream, and so I buy the rolls. And the two taller rolls, there's actually two, one and two. One is 80/20 and one is 100% cotton. So I carry both of those. Other things would be specialty order, but those are the two that I have on hand all the time. Those are two king size rolls. The one in front is actually a queen size, and it's 100% cotton, and I used to always buy the king size rolls. And then I realized most of the quilts that I do would actually fit on a queen size roll. I do not charge you by the entire width of that. I only charge you per square inch. So if I'm cutting off of a king size roll, then I would have some extra that I would use for extra projects or making for design boards. That's not what you're charged for. You're only charged for your square inch that I actually use on your quilt. But when I'm cutting off a king size batting, I'm going to have some extra. So this last time I bought a queen size because any quilts that will fit within that width space, it's usually, I think it's a 93. Quilter's Dream has a couple different sizes of rolls, and I can't remember exactly. There's a super queen and a queen, I believe. So anyway, most of the quilts will fit on that one. If I get a king size quilt in and need to use the larger one, then I can, but it just cuts down on some of that extra batting that I have. I try to use it up. I use it a lot. One of the tricks with the long arm is if I'm trying to line up pantographs, one of the things I can do is stick little squares of batting, tuck it behind the bars, just to kind of to finagle that quilt top around a little bit, just to make sure everything lines up. So I use the extras all the time in all kinds of things. But that's why the 3 rolls, and that's why the 2 different ones. So that's a question I get, and hopefully that answers some of your questions in that regard. Another question I received recently was what is your favorite batting to use with Minky? You've seen in some of my videos, I enjoy quilting with Minky. I know some people have troubles with it. I have not so far, knock on wood. I have not had troubles with Minky. I love the texture it creates on the backing fabric when you use a Minky on the backing. So the question was, do I have a favorite batting to use with that Minky? I have done enough customer quilts that I have done 100% cotton with Minky. I have done 80/20 with Minky, thin, thick, I don't have a problem with any of them. I don't have a preference. It's really your personal preference. Some people absolutely want 100% cotton in all their quilts. I can accommodate that. Others want 80/20 because they say it drapes better. I can accommodate that. I don't have a preference that way. My only preference is that you use batting. I have done some quilts where they preferred not, because the Minky feels very heavy, and I totally understand that. When you buy it at the store and you're buying a large amount, it feels very heavy, and then you're thinking, this is going to be a super heavy quilt. I don't want to put batting in there and make it extra heavy. But what happens when you don't use batting inside, then the quilt is it has no form to it, because that Minky continues to have just that floppy shape that you get when you have it at the store. If there's no batting in there to give that quilt stability, then it's just a big floppy blanket, it really feels like. It's not adding any more heaviness by adding that batting in there. It's creating a stability that, yes, it's still a heavier quilt than using cotton, even a heavier quilt than using flannel, but it gives more form to that quilt where it's easier to handle, more substance to it, and so that's my personal preference. You ask, that's it. That's my personal preference. You can do what you want, and I absolutely have quilted fabric or quilted quilts without batting and Minky. The threads, again, don't block as nicely. I don't think the texture on the back of the Minky is as nice if there's not a batting. If you're familiar with the way sewing machines work, you've got your bobbin thread coming up, your top thread coming down, and those actually lock on the inside of your fabric. So if we don't give enough fabric for that to lock in, we've got tension issues either way. And that's a constant battle with a long arm quilter, is the tension issues between the top and bobbin threads, because so many materials are different. The other day I had one quilt on and stitched through beautifully. The next one I was using the very same fabric. No. I was using the very same thread. So I left the thread, kept everything the same on the machine. It was a new quilt, and I had tension issues on the second one because it's a different fabric, it's a different batting. Every little thing that we changes that whole composition of the way it stitches. And so by adding a batting in there with the minky, we're giving just a little bit extra space for those threads to attach, and the tension looks so much better. There you have my opinion. The last question I've gotten, I got this one earlier in the week about starching your fabrics. Do you starch? Do you not? There are some in the quilting industry that absolutely starch everything. There are others who do not. So my take, this is my opinion. You can do whatever you want. I'm telling you what works for me. I have been quilting for 20 years with a household of children. I have no time to starch fabric. I have no place to dry starched fabric. 20 years ago, they still were telling you to wash all your fabric. I never did, unless it was something that I was sure was going to to fade or something. I never did. I didn't have time to do that. I just didn't. And so the simpler, the better for me. A mom of a busy household, I don't have time to starch. I've never even tried starching. So it's one of those, if I did it, would I like it? Maybe. I don't know. I've never tried it. So personally, I do not starch. I do not wash. I do not pre-wash my fabrics. The only caveat to that, if I'm making a t-shirt quilt, I will pre-wash the backing fabric, because those t-shirts have already been washed, dried, worn, washed, dried, worn over and over again. So I know that those are not going to shrink anymore. If I'm using a cotton backing fabric, I know that it may shrink some. And so I will wash the backing fabric of a t-shirt quilt, just so that I take out some of that sizing a little bit. I think with the newer quilting cottons, it's not as big of a deal, honestly. If you're using a cheaper piece of fabric, I definitely would, because your quilt top is not going to shrink as much as the, no, I got that backward. You're right, yeah, I said that correctly. Your quilt top is not going to shrink as much as that backing fabric might the first time it's washed, because those t-shirts have all been washed and dried before. So back to the starching, I don't starch. I don't wash my fabrics. I will iron them if there's creases in them. If not, then I'm using it straight off the bolts. I'm ironing where I'm going to be cutting to get nice crisp edges. I do use a very hot iron. I use one of the antique irons. No steam in my pressing at all. So that's my take on it. Others do. I know. I've seen them. I've watched them. But it's not for me, not at this point in my life. And maybe sometime I'll try it. So those are some questions I have, or I've had in the past. And so let me show you. Well, I have one other question I was going to address. And yesterday when I was taking pictures of quilts out on the porch, I tried filming as I was taking pictures, and the sound isn't quite right, so it didn't work out. And there was something I addressed on when I was doing that video yesterday that I might go ahead and address here. I was talking about backing fabrics and piecing a backing. I'm just going to hold off. I'm going to hold off. When I get to that quilt, I will talk about that backing and some backing fabrics there. So let's move on to my UFO challenge. So tonight is Quilt Guild, my in-person Quilt Guild. let's talk about that. I mentioned a couple weeks ago at the very end of my video, and so if you did not watch all the way to the end, you may not have seen it. I've mentioned it a couple times in my newsletter. This last weekend, I made it a little more prominent. So I am in the process of putting together an online quilt guild membership platform. And so this would be a more intimate group that I meet with regularly to quilt together. We would do some challenges, some of those things that are similar to, that might go on in a quilt guild, but we're going to be doing this virtually. This will be a paid membership. I am in the process right now of putting together the platform that I will use, the content that I'm going to be using. So if that is something that you are interested in, you can send me an email. My email will be down below, and just let me know that that's something you're interested in, so I'd be sure and put your name on that wait list. And I don't have exact details yet. I don't have a price yet. I'm still working through all of those things. I just wanted to see if the interest was out there, and it definitely is. I've gotten a lot of feedback just from the little tidbits I've put here and there, just to see, and the interest is definitely there. So it is something that I'm moving forward with. And if you're interested in that, just send me an email. I'll add your name to the wait list, and as more information comes up, you will be the first to know about it. I will be launching a founding member drive here soon, and that will be, my intention with that is that will be for those who want to start out with me and learn along with me, because this is a whole new thing that I'm trying. So you'll be in on the ground floor with me, learning along with me how this all works, getting a lot of feedback from you, what you like, what you don't like. That entry price will be the lowest it ever will be that founding members price. After that, when we launch later, it would be at a higher price. So just some incentive for those who are gonna try it with me from the beginning. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email and I'll get more details to you as soon as I have those things together. But the idea came about because I am involved in an in-person guild, and tonight is guild meeting. And this year I am in charge of the challenge. And so we have done a UFO challenge. And so in the month of May, our challenge for this evening is a UFO baby quilt. And anyone who brings a finished UFO baby quilt to guild tonight we give them one of these cute little certificates to hang on their wall, and their name is entered into a drawing, and we pull out a winner and they receive a gift card and some other little goodies. So just a fun thing to do in our quilt guild. But I have been trying myself to make sure I keep up with the UFO challenge. As the leader of it, I feel like I need to be part of that too. And so I've been trying to finish my UFO each month. Last month I didn't quite get it. This month I have it done. So let me insert some pictures here of the full baby quilt, and then we'll talk about some details. Okay, so I made this baby quilt several years ago. I don't know, several years ago. It's a pattern actually out of Lori Holt's book, Farm Girl Vintage 2, and I will link this in the description below. I love these gingham quilts. And let me just show you. So in the book, again, this is a nice book. If you don't have this one, this is a lot of fun. Spiral bound, it lies flat, really nice. These are Lori's gingham quilts, and in the directions in her book here, she gives you directions for every size imaginable. There's everything from a small crib quilt, large crib quilt, full quilt, queen quilt, toddler, twin, small lap, large doll quilt, small doll. I mean, you have all of these. And what she's doing is not just increasing the size of the quilt, not just adding more blocks to it. If you can tell, she's actually increasing the size of the blocks to coordinate with the size of the quilt. So you can see the smallest quilt is using very small squares, and the larger quilts are using larger quilts. And all of those cutting directions, instructions are in the book. I really like that. I like the gingham. I like gingham anyway, gingham fabric. So to make a gingham quilt is really cute. And you can see it's just 3 colors. Well, here's some close-up. All it takes is 3 colors. And so you're using, like this one right here, you're using a dark pink, you're using a light pink, and then you're using a white, or a white with a pink print on it or something like that. You can see in the yellows, a dark yellow, a light yellow, and then a white. So 3 colors, and it's just the color placement that creates the gingham effect. And here's a layout. And so mine is red, just like this one. I made mine is 33 by 39. I don't know which one. Maybe I did because that doesn't match any of those in there. So maybe I added a few more rows. I don't know. All right, so I used, up close here, you can see I had some fabric left from a quilt I had done for somebody else. This was a cowgirl print, really cute. And then I actually used a gingham for my light red color. And then this is I believe this is a Lauer Holt print as well. And it's just a white with a red printing on it. I just think that's so cute. I really like it. It's like I said, mine's like 33 by 39, so it would be a baby quilt. You can lay it out on the floor for a baby. Now here's my backing. I actually used a large gingham on the back, and to make my backing large enough, I used that same cowgirl print and just made an X across the back. And let's talk about the pantograph. This is the diagonal plaid bias cut, and I really like this. You've seen me use this on other things, I'm sure, and I really like it on this quilt because, do you see the squares, horizontal, vertical, and by adding this diagonal plaid, it adds in the diagonal. And a little bit of roundness because it is rounded at the corners. And I think that went really well with it. Try to get the quilt. The fabrics are busy enough; it's a little hard to see, but I like this. I like this pantograph. That one almost makes it look like a picnic quilt there, doesn't it? Especially with the pantograph on top of it. So as you can tell, I don't have my my binding done. Didn't quite get that. I was trying to see if I had any more of this cowboy print, a cowgirl print, because that's what I would really like. I like that darker red around the edges, and I didn't find any of it right away. But that's what my plan is to bind it with, is a darker red fabric. So I will link this down below if you're interested. This is a free PDF. You still have several months. Next month for June, it's the UFO with the fewest number of different fabrics. So like this would have qualified. This only has 3 different fabrics. I'm talking about the quilt top itself. This one only has 3 different fabrics. So this is probably one of mine that has the fewest number of fabrics as a UFO. But if a 2-color quilt, you know, a red and white, or blue and white, or black and white, just the fewest numbers, and it can be any size is what we're going to be working on for next month. And then there's others, brightest fabrics, a UFO that's not a quilt, so that might be a table runner or a bag, you know, a jacket, whatever it is. A wall hanging, then there is a table runner or a topper, and then the largest UFO is for November, so I need to get started on that now. No, I need to finish my calico garden sew along first, and then I'll begin working on finishing up UFOs that from the past. So that's Quilt Guild this evening, and that's my challenge. That's the only project of my own that I finished this past week. So let's move on to some customer quilts. So the first one from Ella has already gone home, so let me insert some pictures here so that you can see that quilt. So Ella's quilt is a sampler, and this is all Kansas Troubles fabrics. So pretty. I love the muted colors. I think you know that by now. She says the pattern is Heartland Heritage. I have not been able to find that pattern. I found a pattern with that name, but it's not the same pattern. So this is a sampler quilt. What I really like about this one is the pinwheel cornerstones separating the blocks, the extra sashing in between the blocks. It gives it a nice effect. I love pinwheels. I think they're really pretty. So that looks really nice on this quilt. And the pantograph is called Leaflet. And let me show you, this is just a printout of what that pantograph looks like. And I like this with those Kansas Trouble prints, the fabric prints. I think this really, it's a subtle, very calming, very just peaceful pantograph. And it went well with the vines and the flowers and the things that Kansas Troubles usually has in their fabric line. And I probably did it about this size in the quilt. We didn't do it really tight. Kind of loose and open. So really pretty. That was a lot of fun to work on. And that size of that quilt was a 62 by 78, so a lap size. Really nice. So Ella's already received that home, and hope she's getting the binding on that and enjoying that quilt. The next one we're going to talk about is this one up at the top, and let me insert some pictures for you to see. All right, so this is Cathy's quilt, and this, Cathy said the name of this pattern is called Mosaic. This is a free pattern by Donna Jordan, and I will link that down below for you. And she said the fabric is all fat quarters, so this is a fat quarter friendly project, and hers are all batiks, and she purchased her fabrics out, I don't know the name of the store, Wabash something. It's out in Terre Haute, Indiana, and if I can find the website for that, I'll link that down below as well. This is really cute. The black sashing to create that mosaic print there. I like the colorways in this. The browns and the blues. The darker reds. So yesterday when I had this laid out on the porch to take pictures, I was talking about how when I lay out a quilt, normally what I do to take pictures is I will do a picture of the overall quilt first, usually straight on. And I always send these pictures to the clients as well. I use them on Instagram and Facebook and those kind of things as well on my website. But the client always gets pictures of them too. These are their quilts, so that I send those pictures to them. But that way they can document those. If you're printing, you could print those off and keep them in a book to show the quilts that you've made, because I know a lot of times we give these away. You can put your information about your quilt. So I always take a picture of the whole quilt first, and then I usually do one that the quilt, a whole quilt one, but it's tilted a little bit. And the reason for that is I took a photography class one time, and they said when you're taking pictures, it's good to make the eye kind of go off at a diagonal, either this way or that way. So a lot of times I'll take a picture of a quilt this direction, a picture of the whole quilt. And again, that helps when I'm putting them into the YouTube videos too, so that you can get a whole bird's eye view of the quilt and the quilt pattern as well. Then when I'm taking pictures, then I'll go in close and I will take pictures of a block or a block, an intersection of a block. I'll try to get some close-ups of some of the fabrics, and then I'll do close-ups of the pantograph itself, because back here, you're not seeing that. You're seeing your pattern up close, then you can see the pantograph. Then the next thing, when I'm laying out a quilt, I'll have it all laid out, and I will take one one corner. Usually if the sun, like yesterday when I was taking pictures, the sun was back over my left shoulder, and not direct sun. It was late in the day, and I was on the porch, a covered porch, so I'm just getting the sunlight, but it was not directly on the quilt. So the light was coming from my left shoulder. So I went to the top right corner and I pulled the quilt back, and just some nice sweeps so that I would get like 2 folds in the quilt on that corner. And then I like to take pictures down close to the quilt, looking at the quilting, but where you get those folds in the quilt behind. And I'll do one in regular picture mode, and then I'll do some in portrait mode. The portrait mode on your camera will blur the background so that sometimes I'll get a little bit more of the porch in there, or I may get a little bit of the foliage that's around or something like that. Just, it adds in some softness without giving a lot of details. And those are usually the pictures that I use as my thumbnails, either on my Instagram or on YouTube. I like that picture. That's one of my favorite pictures, is the one where it's a portrait and you're looking at the folds in the quilt. And then another, I like to show the backing as well. And I used to just fold a corner of the backing over onto the quilt top so that you could see that. Sometimes if the backing is a really interesting one, I will actually flip the quilt over and take a picture of the backing as well. But something I saw from Camille Ross Kelly that she did quite a bit was pull that bottom right corner up and drape it back once so that you're seeing some of the back side of the quilt, but you're still seeing the quilt top. And if you can go back and look at some of the pictures, or look on Instagram maybe, and you'll see some of those different camera angles. This is something you can do for yourself. But just a lot of fun to take your own pictures. I personally like a porch or a wood floor, something like that. It could just as well be done on a carpeted floor. You could do it outside on the grass. I find that the grass, while you want to be in a shady spot, or like today, an overcast day, you don't want direct sunlight. It doesn't make for good pictures. As much as we think it should, it doesn't make for good pictures. But grass, I've never liked the look of laying a quilt on the grass. It doesn't have that, the flat look that I like. And so I tend to not take pictures out on the grass, but you could. And I usually do mine flat. I don't hang my quilts up to take pictures of them. I just don't have the manpower always when I'm needing to do that, or I like the look of on the floor, and folding corners back and things. So those are some of the ways that you can take pictures of your quilts. And so get in close. I like to get in close too, because on my social media I want to highlight the stitching that I'm doing, so I do some close-ups. This pantograph on Cathy's quilt is called Hammersmith, and this was a great choice. Cathy chose this one. It kind of looks like cathedral ceilings and things, or the flying buttresses of the castles overseas, and kind of goes with the whole stained glass feel. We did a light beige, a cream color thread, and that is because the backing on this is a light beige fern print, and so we wanted it to blend with that. So it shows up really well on the backing. Sorry, gotta hold it this way with the light coming in the window. It is an overcast day here today, which is, the lighting's not bad. I just still have to work on the glare. So really pretty. I like this. I think I say that about every quilt, but so many good ones. So you'd have to get the pattern to know how to put those together. And like I said, it's a free pattern on Donna Jordan's website, and so I will link that here. Those are sashing strips. Those are pieced together. So very nice. Really good. Okay, so the next one is Cathy's sister, and I will pull this down while you look at some pictures of it, and then we'll talk about it. So Cathy's sister Janet made this quilt top. This is a Bonnie Hunter pattern. This was the mystery quilt along with Bonnie from 2022 to 2023. And Bonnie's pattern, for at least this one, it was free PDFs or free instructions on her blog, and I will link that down below, as the quilt along was going along. Once the quilt is revealed, the entire quilt top, then she puts it all together in a PDF, and it is can be purchased, and I will link that down below. So this has now been revealed. January, I think, is when the entire quilt top was revealed. So you can purchase this pattern on her website. So the pattern is called Chilhowie, Chilhowie, and it's a Cherokee word that means Valley of the Deer. And Janet says she chose a deer print, the white print. The white print has the aqua deer on there, and that's the reason she chose that. Because the pattern was called Valley of the Deer. That's really cool. So the rest of it was fabrics from her stash. Lots of purples, teals, yellows. She tied it in very nicely for being all scraps. It's really nice. And then we went with a wintergreen thread. And the reason was because the backing was that same wintergreen color. So you can see the pantograph. This is the Soho pantograph. Very versatile print as well. This one, you know, is a little smaller than fist size. We have done this much smaller on baby quilts. I've done this on a ballerina quilt that was really cute. It's a nice fill-in design, very easily stitched out. It nests well together, so you can't tell where the lines are. You can't tell if it's done that way or that way. It really nests well together, and I like patterns that do that, that give the feel of an overall pattern instead of giving the feel of it done in lines. So Janet, I gave Janet the choice of doing wintergreen or white, and she chose the wintergreen. And so on the quilt top, again, once you get in close, you can see that it's wintergreen, but from a distance, the quilt top is so bright and cheery, it just fits right in with those. Lots of little pieces on this. You can see the whole border is like the piano keys with the easy corner triangles on each edge. And then by lining them up, then it makes that triangle. But each one is done as a rectangle there. So pretty large blocks. They look like probably a 12 or 14-inch block. And then yeah, I don't know how long the quilt along went. I know I looked it up. It was like a 6 or 8 week quilt along. So let me show you. I think you could see that Soho pantograph pretty well. Oh, and back up. There's the Hammersmith one. But again, I think you could see that one pretty well too. That's the Hammersmith one. And then the diagonal plaid that was on my quilt. And then here is the Soho. And that's probably about the size that it was done. And again, I like the way that it nests. It looks the same either direction, so you can load the quilt either way and it's still going to look pretty close to the same. That's a nice one. So this quilt is, it's like 80 by 80. It's a very large size quilt. It's a good size. So I'll link this pattern down below if that's something you're interested in making. Lots of scraps, good color placement on that one. You can see that in the larger quilts, the good color placement on that. So a really nice quilt. So that was Janet's quilt. So let's move on now. I have one from Ruth, the red and black one here. This is from Ruth, and I'll pull it down while you look at some pictures of it. Okay, so you saw the large picture of this. Let's just talk about these blocks real quick, because this is something that you could do. You could play with your own graph paper and really kind of put a quilt like this together. So it looks pretty complicated, because the reason it looks complicated is because you have kind of some overlapping blocks. You know, you see this one right here and you think, well, how do you line that up with this one? You got two pieces, you know, this piece is overlapping both of those, and how do you fit those together? If you look at it a little larger, let me pull this open here. So this quilt is done in rows, and this whole thing is one row across. So we're making this block first. And this is probably, you know, that may be a 10 by 10, not a 10 by 10 because it's a little rectangle, maybe an 8 by 10, and then it's joined with this one down here. So that's one pieced block. Then this one is another block. You have two smaller squares here, you have a larger rectangle here, joined with those, and then a rectangle across the top. Those two blocks are the same size, so we join those together. Then the next one over is this same block repeated over here. So there's that one, the large print, and then the small one at the bottom. And then over here, the last block on this row is again the two smaller squares, the larger rectangle, and then the larger rectangle on top. Sometimes in the quilt, you can see in the larger picture, sometimes the fabric placement is the same, meaning the reds here, the blacks here are black and white. Other times it's switched around. And so that's what makes the quilt, it's deceiving to the eye, because you think it's very complicated when it's really just color placement. And the fact we're repeating this block, so if you numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, this being 4, 2 and 4 were the same block, 1 and 3 were the same block, and then on the next row up, that flip-flops. So the larger block is down here. And so then on this one, right above it, we have the two small blocks, the larger rectangle, and then that one. And then so this in this row, you know, 1 and 3 match, and then 2 and 4 match, but it's opposite of the row before that. So a great way to use up some, you know, bigger, this could even start out maybe as a layer cake. Something, I don't know the exact pattern, but just this is something you could do, pull out some graph paper, and you could figure something like that. It's just two different blocks, and then you're alternating them throughout the quilt. And then she did a black border, skinny border, and then a larger red border that ties all of it together. And the pantograph that we used on this is called Espresso. And let me find the red block, because it really shows up well in the red block. There's the Espresso pantograph. And we did this in a medium gray. The whole tone of the quilt, even though we have some white prints, most of the white prints have some, you know, pretty dark printing on them. And so I went with the medium gray just because the whole tone of the quilt was more of a darker tone to it. And so even on the white prints, the gray from a distance doesn't show up. It's not till you get close. So you can really see the detail of this one. This Espresso pantograph we have used on other quilts, and I've done it tighter on other quilts. I felt with the large size of the block, I wanted to increase the size of the pantograph to complement the size of the blocks. And also because the print in the fabric, most of those, almost all of them are small scale prints. And so I didn't want to go with a tiny flower because then I'm competing with the same thing. It's almost, it's not always that you want to use the same thing in a quilt. You want to use something similar, but at a different scale. And so this one, the scale, I increased the scale for the size of the blocks, but it's the opposite of the fabric prints, which are all small scale, where the pantograph is a large scale. So this is a pretty intense pattern anyway, in that a lot going on this pantograph. And so by enlarging it, you're almost seeing more of the detail, I think, because it's not all squished together. So I think it worked really well. Then let me show you the back side. This is the printout of Espresso. I love the swirls on this one. We've talked about this before. I like the swirls. I like how tight they are, giving much more of a ribbon effect. I have other designs that are very similar, the same movement, but if you make these bigger, it feels more playful. So by keeping them thin and ribbon-like, and you can even do this if you're a hand-guided long arm quilter. A lot of times in long arming, especially hand-guided, we say don't cross over your lines. But when you cross over your lines, that's how you create that ribbon effect, where it feels like the ribbon is flipping over. So, you can come in with a swirl like this, and if you don't cross over and keep it big and out or rounded instead of pointed, it feels more playful. When you keep it thin and you cross over your line from one side to the other side, it creates that ribbon effect. So very similar movements, just how the size that you're doing. So I think this feels very classy. I just like it. I like the ribbon feel for it. Let me show you the back of Ruth's quilt. So Ruth did a pieced backing, not the whole thing. There is, let me hold it this way. So about, a third of it is this print, and then we have a long strip of pieced, and then the other 2/3 is that same print again. And it is not centered on the backing, which is actually a good thing. When I loaded this on the quilt, on the long arm, I loaded it horizontal, so that these long seams were running horizontal on the bars. And we talked about this in another video. The reason you would do that is because when this is rolled onto the long arm, this long seam hits the bar all at once and is rotated in there one time. If I would load it this direction, then this seam, every time I roll that bar, this seam is on top of itself and on top of itself and on top of itself. And what happens is that part on the bar gets very thick where the rest of the fabric is a little thinner. It's doable, and I do it all the time, but if I have a choice, I will load it horizontal like this. And that way it goes on the long arm a little easier, a little more even, and not those big heavy seams all on top of each other. So I load it sideways. Espresso is one of those that can be done either way, because it actually stitches out this way. You can see the darker lines is the direction it's stitching. But if I stitched out horizontal like this, but the quilt is more of a vertical, it still looks good. It's still a nice design. Because this is light, just to show you that that's a different row that's stitched out, but when it's all in the same color thread, it all blends well together. So it works for this pantograph. Not all pantographs can I do that. The one last week, the Mod Butterfly one, that has to be stitched. That actually is stitched out with the top of your quilt and your bottom of your quilt left to right, and it's stitched out that way so that when it's up and down, those butterflies are going straight down the quilt. So you just have to pay attention to the pantograph that you're doing. Now, about a pieced backing. It is not easy on a long arm to center especially on a larger quilt, to center a piece like this. And so Ruth did a really nice job of kind of offsetting it some, because then it goes onto the quilt, and it was meant to be that way. Sometimes if you're trying to center it right in, it is a little difficult to do that on the long arm, because the size of it, for one, I can measure and I can start the quilt down on that backing where I think it needs to be so that it's centered over that backing material. But what happens, especially with a quilt like this, not so much this one, but similar to this or to that one, where the quilt top is very heavily pieced, that will stretch a lot more on the long arm than a backing that is not pieced. Okay, so with this quilt, because it was all one backing, it didn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter where that, I started the quilt at the very top of that backing fabric that I can and stitch it all out. There's nothing on the back that I'm trying to center. With this one, because I wasn't trying to center it, I didn't have to worry about it. But this pieced backing is not going to stretch as much as the quilt top, because the quilt top will stretch just a tad bit more because it's got a lot more seams in there. There's a lot more places for it to stretch, where the backing fabric isn't going to stretch as much. So I may line it up when I first start the long arm. I may line it up and think, okay, I need to start 3 inches down so that I get that center piece of the backing right where I want it. But as I'm stitching it out, that quilt top may stretch a little bit more, and that backing fabric may not stretch as much because it doesn't have as many seams that will stretch. So it is difficult to do. We do try it, and you know, many times it's successful, but it's even better, and I think it's honestly more pleasing to the eye if it's offset just some. It just, it's unusual, you know, and then if it's not perfectly in the middle, it doesn't matter because it wasn't meant to be. So just a little bit of explanation there. I hope I didn't jumble that all up, but that made a little bit more sense. Just the more, this one's going to stretch a little bit more than just a wide backing that has no seams in it. But this is not going to stretch as much as this one would, because this one has a lot more seams that stretch. Now, when I say stretch, I'm not talking huge amounts. You're not going to see, when you get your quilt back, you're not going to notice it. But if I'm trying to line something up, it does become noticeable, that little bits of stretch. Now, the other thing we have to factor in there too is that the more dense the quilting is, the more it draws that fabric in, especially on the quilt top. Because I will see as I'm doing a quilt, I can tell where it was stitched. It's pulled in just a little bit more than the part that's unstitched, and that's just part of it. But there's all those factors that we're playing with, and so we can do it. Everything's doable. But I'm just trying to explain that a little bit and a little bit more. So piece backings, I love them. Wide backings, I love them. A lot of fun to do either one. I love piece backings because you can use up some of the same fabrics that you've got left over from the front onto the back, create some interest. I love wide backings. I feel that they save you time and money. In putting a quilt together, you know, it's your preference, whatever. Just some words of wisdom there, I guess. I don't know. Take it or leave it. Okay, I have one more customer quilt, and this one is hot off the presses, actually hot off the long arm. I just finished it up right before I started filming today, and so I will get that one, and I'll insert some pictures here so that you can see the full quilt, and then we'll talk about this one. All right, this is Joyce's quilt, and I know this is for a wedding later, early fall, late summer time, and all purples and blues and blacks and the greens, all flowers, a lot of iris flowers, and even peacock tails in there. A a lot of fun. This block, again, very simple block to make. We have one large square, that's probably a 10 by 10. And then we have a sashing and a black block. Same thing, 10 by 10 square. I'm assuming it's 10 by 10, I've not measured it. A sashing, and a black square. But when you rotate these different directions, it's the same block all over, but you just rotate it different directions. The one constant is that black sashing block. Just really cute. And then there's a black border on this one. And then her backing fabric. This was a wide backing. This is called Peacock Fantasy by Lauer of Grizzly Gulch Galleries. Benartex is the maker. And let me get go in the right direction. Look at this backing fabric. Wow. Really pretty detail. You can see the colors, the purples and the blues, almost iridescent like a peacock tail is, and then all of the design in there. Very detailed, and wow, does that not complement the front? So when picking a pantograph, let me talk about this. Let me pull out my binder because I want to show you something. I have a peacock tail pantograph. Let me show you what that looks like. This one is not, it only shows, it doesn't show it repeating. But, so if you continued this on, then this piece would hook in right here, and that whole thing would continue on down the row. Then you would have another one like this that would nest in right here. Very dense, very detailed, very elaborate, I want to say. So when I saw Joyce's quilt and I saw the peacock tails on the front and thought, I wonder if I could use this. So I did audition this, but let me show you that backing. With that backing, having all of that detail already, I thought if I add that on top, it's too much. It's too much. It would have just looked like a mess of threads. It would have been too much. And so I thought about it, and I thought, so it's not always, each quilt is so different. I mean, I can't just say, oh, there's bear prints, I need to use bear paws in here, or there's deer, so I need to use deer on this fabric. You know, there was deer in that, so I need to put use deer for the thing. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. This one, the peacock, was not going to work for this one. It was going to be way too much detail. So my thinking was I wanted something that kind of, and I didn't want flowers. I didn't like the look of flowers. The quilt top has so many busy quilt or busy fabric prints in it. I just didn't feel like flowers was going to work well either. So many different, you've got the irises, those may be upside down. Many iris prints in here, and I just felt flowers wasn't going to work well either. So this is what I went with. This is called iCat. This is called iCat 1. There is another one, iCat 2, that actually echoes this again. So it's like double the lines in there. This is just the way this PDF printed out. And I need to explain it. When I print out a PDF of the design, this isn't the size that it always comes up on my computer on my long arm. This is made by the designer, whoever designed the pantograph, and they create a PDF of the file. So it's however large they want, however many repeats they want to show you. You know, this one, when the designer made the thing, she just showed you the two prints, didn't show you the repeat. So it's up to the designer, the PDF file that they put in there, or the JPEG picture that they put in there for me to print out. So this can absolutely be adjusted bigger or smaller. And I think I kind of talked about this last week, that you may we'll kind of judge this. Don't assume that this is the size. We need to talk about size anytime that I do a quilt for you. So even on my website, if you see it like this size, let me know. You know, it's like, yes, I like that size, or no, I want it smaller, I want it bigger, because it doesn't necessarily mean, and a lot of times, honestly, I judge it. When I put a quilt on the long arm, I'm judging it. So let me show you what I mean by that. Because this one had very large squares. Again, we're talking about a 10 by 10 square. I didn't want to go with something this small. It would have created too much. The fabric is already so pretty and the backing was already so pretty. I did not want to compete with all of that, okay? So I like this design, and then it kind of mimicked the peacock eye, you know? And it even kind of mimics a flower print, flower petal, but I like the symmetry of it. I like the modern feel. I don't know if I don't know how to explain that. But when I went with the pantograph, I did that design, but I did it much, much larger. So you can see in relation to the block. You can't see it until I get up close, but this is, you know, the top of it is right here. The bottom of it is right here. So it's almost, it's about 2/3 of a block is the size of it. If I get in close, can you see that on the peacock tail? Can you see the size of each one? I made it fairly large. Now with this one, there's still, you know, it's still stitching about 1 inch apart is the space in between one of those. I really like this. This one turned out really well. Nice coverage. Mimics the fabric, but without competing with the fabric, because I'm not trying to do those same flowers over the top. It's something different, but complementary. And so the thread, you can see all the threads on the black. The thread is actually a dark gray, and I went dark because this whole quilt is dark, and I didn't want something light to show up, so it is dark. And you can see the size of that. It's, you know, almost 2/3 of it, because it starts up here and it finishes down here. I like the texture it gave to this quilt without competing with all of the it complements it. It doesn't compete with it, and that's what I want. I want it to pull everything together and complement it without it being competing for the attention. Like I said, hot off the presses. I actually haven't even taken pictures of this, so whatever pictures I inserted prior to, I haven't done yet. That's kind of strange, isn't it? And then you can see it on the back. So it adds to, but doesn't take away from. Very large quilt. This one, did I say that? This one is 80 by 90. So it's a nice size quilt. It'd be a nice quilt for a wedding gift. I mean, they'll be able to use this on a bed. Really nice. So that is Joyce's. So as you can see, I've been very busy this week. A lot of large quilts, and many of these will take 7-8 hours on the long arm, depending on how detailed that pantograph is. So some full days of work there, but so enjoy this, what I'm doing. So that's what I have for you this week. If you have questions about anything, let me know. If you have questions that you want me to cover or things that you don't understand, put them in the comments, let me know. I'd love to answer your questions, and that'll give me some ideas on things to cover in the future. And again, if you're interested in that online membership, then just drop me an email and I'll be sure to put you on the wait list for that and get you information as soon as I have that available. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I have my newsletter that comes out this weekend. If you're not receiving that, you can sign up for that in the comments below too. And I hope you have a great week. Hope you're enjoying your quilting, and I'd love to see what you're working on. So send me a message, show me pictures. I'd love to see what you're working on too. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week.